how does a local Tampa Bay CEO, how should they handle that? What are the legal ramifications of that? What are the PR ramifications of that? At TBBW, what we try to do is help CEOs know how to run their companies and know how to handle situations like that and know how to pivot. So local experts, let's talk about it.
Welcome, everybody, to this special collaboration between TBBW, Tampa Bay Business and Wealth, and the Law of Relevancy podcast. Today, we're joined by esteemed journalist and publisher, founder and editor of the Tampa Bay Business and Wealth, Bridgette Bello. We have Brendan Weinhold from Fallston Group, and we have also Bill Grob with Ogletree and Deakins. Thank you guys for joining us. I'm really excited about this conversation. It's been one hell of a week, huh?
It has been a hell of a week, that's for sure. Thanks for making time to bring us all together and give us an opportunity to talk about some interesting happenings in the CEO world.
Well, I think it's very relevant because, there's this old saying that all news is good news. And this week has been really interesting because of the fallout and the way that the company Astronomer has reacted to it. I mean, what are you seeing from a PR perspective?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me. And, I've had the opportunity to work with many high-profile leaders and large organizations over the last 16 years that Fallston Group has been around. And there's a few things really that we can notice, which is common even in this circumstance, which is that there's typically four key drivers as to why people find themselves in crisis: money, power, sex, and revenge. And we can clearly see that one or more of those are in play today.
Yeah.
And even more so, we also see that typically crisis costs time, money, customers, careers, and in the worst case of scenarios, freedom and lives. And we've already hit 4 out of those 6. So clearly, all of it is in play, and they are in full-blown crisis mode.
And at this point, we're only 9 days in.
Yeah, well, and it's funny, we made the decision to have this conversation, and it's certainly not local, right? It took place in Boston. But my thought was just, that could be anybody. That could be any local CEO. That could be anyone running any of the companies in Tampa Bay. And would they know what to do next? And would they know how to handle that, right? The running joke has been, and Bill, I'm going to ask you to talk about this a little bit, and actually you too. Not that any CEOs in Tampa Bay would go to a Coldplay concert, right? But if they did, if the camera happened to land on them, would they react that way? And regardless of what the issue is, so much of how we react to things is what determines what happens next, right? Had they just stood there and the camera just went by them, nobody would have had any idea. But because of that involuntary reaction, it became a conversation that was worldwide. Like there was no escaping it. Every feed, every meme, everything. And so really what I wanted our conversation to be about is, how does a local Tampa Bay CEO who's not at a Coldplay concert, but finds himself in a similar, probably not quite as viral, hopefully, situation, how should they handle that? What are the legal ramifications of that? What are the PR ramifications of that? How could they make sure that they react the correct way? And at TBBW, what we try to do is help CEOs know how to run their companies and know how to handle situations like that and know how to pivot. So local experts, let's talk about it.
Yeah, well, it's funny that you mentioned it. I was actually speaking with a local CEO yesterday, and we were talking about this upcoming podcast, and they said that one of their employees had actually said something political online related to some protests, and it had instantly gone viral. They came in on Monday, and they had voicemails for miles talking about, like, this person worked for you, blah, 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 blah. And so they had to meet with their crisis professionals and their attorneys to figure out, what can we even do with this? Ultimately, they chose the path of like, hey, let's just turn the lights, let's dim the lights, let's go, incognito, get our head down so we don't get shot. And that's their plan. And this was actually only a couple days ago too. And so it is quite interesting, and that's why we work with the professionals to help us figure out. And obviously, you've got a platform to educate us all, but it is quite interesting to watch it unfold. And like, what are your moves?
Right. Well, and should you already have that team in place before something like that happens? I mean, heard Brendan speak several times, and over my years in media, I've seen it live. It's not a question of when or of if, it's a question of when, right? Like we are all going to find ourselves in a situation just like this one at some point, not at a Coldplay concert, not with the head of HR, not swaying to the music, all those things, but something equally as damning and as definitive from a career and company perspective. And so what should we be doing in advance of that? And I'd love to give Bill the opportunity to talk about that from a legal perspective. So Bill from the road, thanks for joining us. What would you like to add to the conversation at this point?
Well, thank you, Bridgette. Thank you for having me. Here's what my thinking is, and I've talked to a lot of my colleagues about it, and certainly have spoken about it quite a few times since, again, only a week ago, right? Last Wednesday, it seems like forever ago that this happened because there's so much proliferation of information on the internet. But, we talk about fiduciary duty and what the duty is of the CEO to the company. And to put it in lay terms, it all comes down to trust, right? The CEO is the highest position of trust in the organization. The CEO represents the culture and the integrity of the organization. And if the CEO is seen, in this instance, perhaps behaving badly, then people will question what the CEO's decision-making is like. Add to it that now you have the highest sort of policing entity in the organization, the chief people officer, who is the head of human resources. Human resources is the focal point for if someone wants to express, and usually very reluctantly so, because they're worried that no one's going to hear about it, but someone is responsible for coming in and making an allegation of discrimination or harassment, and that individual believes that the head of the department that is charged with taking in those claims is now cozied up to the CEO. How do you think that employee is going to feel about how their complaint is going to be received? HR has to be the conduit, right, between employees and management, and they have to have trust from both sides.
I'd love to add to that, Bill. We have a saying in our business, another saying, and you might hear me say that quite a few times, but reputation leads to trust, and trust leads to valuation, and not all currency is financial. And so I think Bill and I can probably both agree on the fact that there's a natural relationship, a tension between the court of law and the court of public opinion, right? And so as we take a look at trust and accountability and transparency, there's a fine line that CEOs and organizations need to dance on or dance in between to make sure that they're winning and doing everything they can to protect themselves legally. But then there's also an ability to tell their story and actually what happened, and not having fake statements go around, because ultimately the organization, and even still to this day, have sort of balked where they did not respond fast enough. And if you don't tell your story, someone else will. And when someone else tells your story, it's certainly not the story you want told.
Well, and I don't even know if it's been proven that was a fake statement, or if that's just their way out of him being even more of an idiot, right? I mean, what if that was his statement? What if they're just saying that it wasn't, and that he really, really botched it that badly? I mean, it's just such a white paper, right? I feel like this is going to be used in future PR and labor and employment legal classes in colleges of just like what not to do, right?
For the sake of whoever wrote that statement, or maybe did not write the statement, I really hope that it was fake, because one thing we really would hope that someone in that position would not do is start to point the finger, right? Why someone else was responsible for really your bad actions. And that's something we take into consideration when we craft statements, right? Is let's be transparent, but let's also take accountability, right? Let's look in the mirror and say, what could I have done better? And I think that's a very strong and needed attribute of a CEO and leader.
So for the people who haven't actually seen the statement you're talking about, what are these details you're talking about? So obviously pointed the finger at someone. What else?
Well, whoever wrote the statement, right? The alleged statement ended it with something to the effect of that he was very upset that his privacy was compromised without his permission.
Well, there is
staring at a concert with
there's some juxtaposition there,
right? I mean,
there is legitimacy to this too, because now there are rumors that Andy is going to be suing Coldplay for what happened, and I think we can all agree on that. That's probably a little silly, considering if you're at a concert, chances are you may end up on the Jumbotron. And look at what all the other sports teams are doing now, right? They're taking advantage of this opportunity, free marketing. Let's now actually have the Andy cam, right?
Yeah.
Where you're catching people standing behind each other and then ducking away from the camera. It's just it's become a complete laughing stock, unfortunately, because I believe that the organization did not handle this, and they were not prepared to handle anything of this nature.
Well, and when Cords and I were talking about doing this collaboration and having this conversation with our local experts, he said, imagine going to Amalie Arena, which is our local arena, which would be where we would see Coldplay if any of us went to a Coldplay concert, right? And he said, of course you wouldn't walk in with somebody. You would see 100 people before you got to your seats, right? So you pretty much have given up your right to privacy as soon as you go into that public arena. And so for that to have been the response to me is just, I picked my jaw up off the floor. Like,
well, it adds to it. It adds to it because I think part of the reason why it's so viral is the irony of it all.
Right.
It's like it helps make it such a great story. You've got like these paragons of ethics and power in a corporation and people looking up to them, making such a terrible decision and then going to a public place and then having a private moment and being all upset about it, getting caught on the camera. And then all of the other memeable things about it. It's just a comedy of events that will ever be with us. It's terrible.
Well, look, anybody with a recording device or an iPhone can wreak havoc on your brand in seconds. 100%. And I think it's really important to take a step back and say, wow, how quickly did the internet, the court of public opinion, come together to actually identify this person based on just one simple video because of the wow factor that people had. And so, it's just like any drama TV show that you may sit down to watch at night. It's a perfect storm.
Well, it was literally like hours, and
it was minutes.
Yeah. I looked at there's a thing called Google Trends. So if you go to google.com/trends, you can put in keywords and you can see the search volume for that keyword over time, and you can be very specific about it. I could see yesterday, I could see a week, 30 days, and so I did it for Astronomer, which is the company where these two people worked. And it immediately shot up within 36 hours. Like it was the most popular thing online. And if there's at least one silver lining to the whole thing, all of the hyperlinks pointing to the company now have given it much better SEO ranking because the traffic is now triple to the website.
So there's people who said it was a publicity stunt.
I can't. I mean,
I can't imagine that that's true. I mean, this is a destroyer of families, right? So, to go back to the actual idea of privacy and the statement, right? The statement that came out, the first thing that came to my mind when the statement came out, allegedly from Andy, was you got to fire your publicist, right? Because that was probably one of the stupidest statements that I've seen. So I can't. Hopefully, it's not something that someone put together for him, but the idea of privacy at a public event is non-existent. And I've certainly seen people talking about, well, can someone sue? And generally the answer is no, right? There is a defamation potential for that, but it has to be done intentionally with the intent to harm someone. This is something that you see at every major venue in the country, including our wonderful Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? The stadium says, in there, and I think Gillette Stadium has these same signs that says your likeness and image may be captured by video cameras during the event. And there's signs all over. You don't notice them just because they it's just like an everyday occurrence. You go in and you see a whole lot of things around you and you don't pay attention to them. But to actually say that, hey, no, you've invaded my right of privacy, what should have been a private moment. I'm sorry, but you can't have a private moment with 65,000 witnesses that you don't know.
Well, I think we should talk about that for a moment, is that there's a very real human side to all of this, which is that there are multiple families being ripped apart in the court of public opinion on a very national and international stage. And it's really a horrible situation in many ways. And one thing I'd like to add is that, if Andy were to go and take a legal route against Coldplay or Gillette Stadium or whomever it may be, what does that do for your reputation? What is the message you're sending? Is that I'm not taking accountability. I'm going to try to win this in the court of law. and, ultimately act like a victim here. And in reality, you're no victim. You had a responsibility to lead an organization and really set the standard for everyone involved. And you haven't done that. And so if Andy was sitting here with us today, I would say that it starts by looking in the mirror. It is doing everything you can to go home and right size the ship with your family. And most importantly, your young, impressionable children that now have to go to school and probably hear about this, and take it on the chin. And unfortunately, I think in these situations, you need to realize when there is an opportunity to rebuild a reputation or to understand the volatility of the situation and do what is morally right in this situation.
So
yeah, and here's the other thing, right? During litigation, everything comes out. So not only is it going to, turn around and sort of kick you in the pants by doing it, it's going to be catastrophic to your family. All of the dirty details, whatever they happen to be, are not only going to affect you, they're going to affect Miss Cabot, they're going to affect everyone involved, including Astronomer. And you don't think about that, right? Because every single detail of that relationship will be disclosed and a matter of public record in any type of litigation.
we all know way more than we would have ever known about these people because of this, right? And so the kind of second iteration of everything that went viral was the $16 billion inheritance that Miss Cabot potentially compromised, right? I mean, she's married to the Cabot family. And so we all know that she has a $1.6 million mortgage on a house that she just signed with a man that she just married. I mean, it's like the mushroom cloud effect of this and where it's gone with these people that we would have never even known their names, let alone their personal details. And so I think the value that we can offer, both from the Law of Relevancy and from the TBBW perspective in Fallston and Ogletree, is what kind of plan should they have had in place? What should they already have known if something happens? This is what happens next, right? Most of us have, I'll use a disaster plan as an example, right? Most of us have a hurricane plan. Okay, we're in the cone. This is what happens next. And we have these steps and we do those things just without even thinking about them. So what should a plan look like? Because, the other thing that I see in this is like, he's gone as he should be, but just as guilty, also married and destroying another family is the woman who was the head of HR, destroying a company culture, and she still works there.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about.
I'm like, what kind of message does that send, right? So,
well, it's a matter of time. It's just a matter of time, Bridgette. She's negotiating an exit package. That's the only option she has. That was really the only option he had. Someone asked me, what's the first thing I thought when I saw the video? And it's that neither one of them is going to be working there any longer. Because can she rehabilitate her reputation in the organization? The answer is no. You have a relationship with the CEO. You've sort of transgressed that line of trust. And now, will the employees feel comfortable going to a department that's headed up by this young lady? The answer is no. And so generally what we see here is he negotiated a package. He probably had an employment agreement. It probably had something of a morals clause with regard to a cause termination, but you don't want to let your CEO go and terminate them, especially someone with as much institutional knowledge as he had. You want to have a cooperation clause. So they worked out a package on the way out. He got that done relatively quickly. It was smart of the board to take care of that quickly. And I suspect Ms. Cabot is doing the same thing, negotiating a package on the way out. Ms. Cabot, though, has a different claim. What if she says, yeah, I did it. I engaged in the relationship, but I felt like I had to do it because of the disparity of power. I felt like my job might have been in jeopardy if I didn't do it. A very real claim. And I suspect that's some of the things that the company is trying to work out with her at this point in time as they negotiate a potential exit.
Well, because of her expertise, I'm sure she knows all about that.
She is uniquely positioned.
Yeah,
yes, absolutely.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Well, Bridgette, I think you bring up a really good point, which is failing to plan is planning to fail.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we talk about having a plan, I don't think that there is a plan out there that can foresee this sort of thing coming. But as you mentioned before, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so as business owners, when you have a board and you're growing and you're getting funding, you must have a plan, right? And so it's a matter of if something were to happen on Friday at 5 when your CEO is on his way to a Coldplay concert, who's responsible for answering to the media? Who's responsible for working with the internal workforce? Who's responsible for handling the media, social media, on what platforms? When do you say it? How do you say it? Where's the legal counsel, right? So there's what we call a crisis go team needs to be established. They need to have workshopped the plan after even having the plan. They need to be media trained. So there's a slew of things that you can do in advance of an incident like this. But even if it doesn't happen, that's great, but you want to make sure that you're prepared for something like this coming down the chute, even though it's a horrible situation. If you don't have a plan, you're not going to be able to, come back from something like this. And you can see that. And I think one really important factor here that we're not talking about is that the employees and people involved in Astronomer are finding out in real time on the news. And that is a number one role in crisis leadership. You do not allow your largest and most important stakeholders to learn information from the outside. You must communicate with them first because they deserve it and they're your priority. And that didn't happen.
It's exactly the same on the legal side, right? You have the outward-facing plan that you're talking about on the public-facing position of the company, but now you have the inward-facing plan, and you should have, sorry, I think I may have been buffering for a second, but you should have a plan in place to launch an investigation immediately because you have to get in front of it as much as you can. So along with that outward-facing social media, what do we say to the public plan? You must have an investigation plan and the ability to assign an investigator to investigate the details, to be able to make decisions about the future of the company and the leadership immediately once any type of crisis comes up, especially like this.
So I can speak from the media perspective. I am continually amazed at the people in C-level roles who have not had media training and who do not think they need media training. For those boards out there that are hiring CEOs, again, from the legal perspective and the PR perspective, do you think that they should require media training before they put somebody in a position like CEO?
Totally.
Absolutely. And there's one key word here, characteristic, that we oftentimes deal with when dealing with issues of sensitivity, adversity, or crisis with high profile leaders. And that's ego. The reason why they don't want training is because they know it. They got it. They don't need anybody to help them with their key talking points, or they look great on camera. They've done it 1,000 times. But when we work with organizations, we talk about creating organizational muscle memory, right? You have to, just like going to the gym or anything else that you do, you must do it every day and work on your craft, or else when you go to meet the moment, unfortunately, you're not going to do what you were responsible for doing, really.
And Bill, is that a part of legal counsel as well? Is that something that you feel like from a legal perspective is helpful? Did we lose you?
I think we lost Bill.
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to answer that question and say yes.
From a marketing standpoint, obviously, like we're working with clients, we have retainers, we're ongoing communications and things like that. Like most companies of a reasonable size have things figured out for marketing. Most people have figured out whether or not they're advertising or whatever. But at what size of an organization do you need to have to think about, we need to have a crisis plan?
I think it's if people rely on you for a paycheck, you need to have a plan. And to your point, a lot of business owners are unsure of that answer. So we actually took the initiative to create provide a reputational risk score. And so if you go to our website at fallstongroup.com, you can actually take a small assessment and then actually be generated a score based on, do you have a plan? Have your spokespeople be trained? And you can actually take this small assessment and immediately can identify, hey, do we have a gap here? Are we at risk if something were to happen? Or are we prepared? And even if you are prepared, you need to continue to train and have those annual workshops because it's really expected of you.
And the likelihood of something like this happening, you're pretty certain. Especially if you're a company that has trucks on the road. There was the incident a few years ago where there was the full service company that had one of the drivers on Bayshore and they were drunk driving and they got in an accident and somebody got killed. Like that organization had to respond very, very quickly. And just like any of these, you need to have, like you said, muscle memory. You need to have like some things talked about initially within your leadership. Anybody that might get a camera stuck in their face on whether they're going to say anything at all or who's responding.
And that's another, I was going to say, that's another great point, right? Is because of that ego, oftentimes the CEO thinks it should be them and it shouldn't be them, right? And so a part of that plan really is identifying who is that person that's going to talk to the media. Is that person media trained? Do they have a plan as to what our consistent message is going to be, regardless of what the current crisis is? And it's just shocking to me the number of organizations that are willing to have that exposure of like, yep, you're our CEO, Courts, and if crap hits the fan, we got all confidence you know how to handle it and just go, right?
Yes. And then there's what happens next. So like I've also seen in cases where there's been some kind of a crisis, they've dealt with the immediate aftermath, but then there's how do you come out of it? So, a lot of times we see the playbook of like, okay, now we're going to highlight all the charitable things we do. Now we're going to talk about the impact we have in the community and, all of these other things. Like it's more than just like, how are we going to react? It's like, how do we build out of this as well?
Right. We think of data breach, bad press, social media attack, investigation, litigation, sex scandal, disgruntled employees, union issues, Martha Stewart, Goldman Sachs, BP,
all the
Ray Rice, NFL, you name it. We've seen this on a platform, and honestly, today's society is really good at smelling BS. Nobody wants a corporate statement. Nobody wants to hear about how much money you donated, which just tells us how much money you have. It's about the transparency and the authenticity. And that's why when you respond, you must respond with precision and punch, with a high level of transparency, authenticity, and a human element to it. That's what people are really looking for. That emotional, empathetic statement that can say, "Hey, I'm human too." And so, I think Andy here has a lot to work on, but also he has a lot to do regarding telling his side of the story, even if it means just taking it on the chin.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've had a lot of local examples of this, right? I mean, we recently had the ferry incident, and that was a local businessman that I think ultimately, I don't know what happened with it. I'm not going to put myself in a legal position to guess, but I mean, it was very high profile, right? We've got a local brewery that is under federal indictment for stealing millions of dollars. I mean, we have local instances of this happening, and how they've been handled. I mean, is there a case? And you just rattled. That was amazing. The cases you just rattled off, by the way.
Muscle
I could not
memory.
have done that.
That's right.
Yeah.
It is muscle memory, absolutely. But is there a case? And I'm gonna guess the answer is no, because if there's a case where it was done well, we don't remember it. But is there a case where it was done well that you can point to, that they had a plan, they had a crisis PR firm, they had a labor and employment attorney, they knew what they were going to do as soon as it broke, and that it just went away?
The best case study that I can point to is Patrick Doyle with Domino's, when it was the first time, and this is the news clip, that a iPhone video or a cell phone video, or video for lack of a better term, actually ended up being in the court of law, in the court of public opinion. So it was the first time that a video actually ended up becoming viral and on YouTube. And so you had two Domino's employees that were sticking cheese in their nose and videotaping it and doing what every great employee does, which is post it on YouTube for the world to see. And quite frankly, Domino's was at the time labeled as tasting like cardboard. And so Patrick Doyle took a hard look in the mirror and everything they were doing, and he came out with a video statement, which again was very new at that time. And he talked about how sickened he was. And we do a keynote and where you can actually follow the believability meter based on what he's saying. And when he says it sickens me, it skyrockets, because that's what people were thinking and that's what they wanted to hear. Yeah. And they changed the way that they do things. They doubled down on quality and customer service and training and development and employee retention, all that. And in the following years, they performed better than Apple and Amazon, and from in the stock. So it goes to show you that if you can do it the right way, there is a lot of room. And we actually say that crisis can be a growth opportunity, contrary to popular belief. But again, you have to do it right, and you have to be doing it for the right reasons.
Well, you just mentioned, we were talking earlier about how the reason it went viral is because it resonated. Just the memeability, the punchline of it all, the irony, the juxtaposition, all of those factors made it very memeable because it was so relevant. And then the relatability, the resonance of actually aligning with people who are in the audience, aligning the people who are the stakeholders and looking at the company from the outside is also very important on the aftermath.
Absolutely, because a lot of times leaders want to spin their way through it, right? And we talk about you lead your way through crisis. You don't spin your way through it. And when you do that, you really set the stage and the standard for how your organization is going to operate going forward.
Well, I have the question for Bill.
Oh,
it looks like you've joined us again. Can you hear us, Bill?
I can. Can you hear me?
Okay, great. So what's Astronomer? Yeah, we got you. So what is Astronomer doing now? Like, what's happening in those board meetings now?
Yeah, and so that's why this is different, right? In those situations that we've been talking about, by the way, rattling off all those cases sounded like a great Billy Joel song. I think we should maybe put pen to paper on that. But they're talking about who's responding. That's the CEO. The CEO has instant credibility and comes on and talks about these things. But the chairman of the board, who is the one that would respond in this situation, may not have that kind of training. So now we're talking about the board, and I look at things from a let's avoid litigation perspective. And so, what the board should be doing, I think, is what exactly the board is doing the investigation, taking decisive action. And maybe that CEO isn't media trained like the CEO should be. And maybe that's why we're not hearing as much from them so quickly.
So from a legal perspective, you actually think it's being handled well?
I think the board is doing, to me, the best it can. It probably didn't have the action plan in place that it should have to launch the investigation, but I think it's trying to reposition the company. Obviously they've put Pete DeJoy in charge. He's made a statement. I think they're probably working with the best that they can.
Because exactly what I thought would happen, right, happened when I asked you that question, because I was like, oh yeah, I vaguely remember the whole Domino's thing and the cheese up the nose, right? But it was handled so well that it was like dealt with, and I still eat Domino's. Do you still eat Domino's?
I try not to.
I know. Well,
I had no aversion
we all
to it.
try not to,
Yeah.
but I mean, my point is, you want to be yesterday's news. You have a plan. It's still going to happen, right? But it's, what do people remember? What sticks with them? What's litigation worthy, for lack of a better way to put it, right? What happens post that? How long do they remember it?
Well, I think it's important to talk about too that, there's a whole internally, right? What were there smoldering issues? So we break things down into sudden and smoldering. So smoldering issues are things that we know about, but we don't do anything about them because tomorrow's going to be a better day, or that won't be a problem. We just kind of hope for the best. And then these sudden issues, yes, this could have been a sudden issue, but let's talk about that. Not everything is a crisis, right? There are issues of how we break it down, issues of sensitivity, adversity, and crisis. And if you don't handle things at the base level, they can escalate their way up to the top. And so were there signs internally of this relationship? Did people know what was going on? There's an infamous person in this whole thing. If you go to the Jumbotron, there is a woman on the left-hand side of the screen who looks like she wanted to say, I knew this was going to happen, or I knew this was happening, but I didn't do anything. Is she somebody that should be in those boardrooms talking about, hey, you saw something, why didn't you say something? And I'd love to hear Bill's take on that.
Yeah. What is your take on that, Bill?
So here's the interesting thing. If the question was, is it Alyssa Stoddard, right, the vice president of human resources? By all accounts, it's not. And if it was Alyssa Stoddard, that's pretty important. Human resources is the one, as I said, charged with enforcing the rules of the organization, maintaining the highest standards of integrity and fiduciary duty. And if it was someone else in HR that knew about the relationship that failed to report it, now you've destroyed the trust of the entire HR department. So you might have to clean house. Fortunately, in this situation, it didn't appear to be someone else with the company. So maybe Alyssa Stoddard's going to be taking over, maybe on an interim basis. We'll see. But it would have been just a complete destruction of the HR department if they knew that someone else in the department knew about a relationship that was required to be reported and didn't report it.
Yeah, I think, to Bill's point and to what you're talking about is how fast is the recovery time, or what can organizations do? A lot of times in these situations, we tell clients to focus on what we call the 15-70-15 paradigm. And so after an incident like this, you're going to have 15% of people that, quite frankly, they don't care. They're going to do business with Astronomer because it's good for their business. There's the other 15% where if they would never do business with Astronomer, and they weren't going to before. This was just, they didn't like them, they didn't like Andy, whatever it may be. And what we're focused on during times of crisis is the 70% of people in the middle, the court of public opinion, that it has a balanced narrative. They've understood all the facts. They've read everything they could, but now they're sitting at home on their couch, turning on the nightly news, and they're waiting to hear what you have to say and waiting to render their own verdict based on how you handle this. And so that's something that you talk about recovery. We've got to get out there and tell your story and allow those 70% in the middle to actually render their own verdict based on what you say, how you say it, and the level of authenticity, transparency, humanness, empathy, and all the things that we talked about before.
Well, the thing that comes to mind, I mean, those are some really, really good points. The thing that comes to mind for me is, like, I married somebody I worked with. 50% of the people out there are married to somebody they've worked with at some point or another. So the whole concept, and we're doing a lot of moralizing in the public here about the situation. It's like, what is the proper way to deal with workplace relationships? What is the best way to deal with
question.
it? Because that's talk about advice
Bill?
for CEOs. What is the best way?
Yeah.
The
So let me say
handbook.
this.
It happens, right? I mean, it does happen.
Here's what happens. You spend 1/3 of your life in bed, so buy a good mattress. You spend another third of your life at work and another third of your life doing whatever else. But most people meet the most people that they know at work. And so workplace relationships are very common. But companies generally have a policy that says, if you're going to be in a workplace relationship, we want you to report it. If you're in a workplace relationship with someone who's in your supervisory line, someone who either directly or indirectly supports you, then we're going to ask possibly one of you to move to a different position, most likely the person in the superior role. But we will never allow someone in the C-suite to, generally, especially the CEO, to be dating anyone else, because there is no peer to the CEO.
Not the head of HR,
So
right?
have
I mean,
have the policy in place, have a reporting relationship, and then report it. Because 9 times out of 10, the company's going to say, fine, let's see what we can do to make sure that we can work this out so that no one feels that there's any favoritism and that you all can have a great relationship. I know that there's things called love contracts that some of our clients use all the time. And they basically say, look, Susie and I are in a relationship. We understand that it has nothing to do with work. We're not going to bring it into work. And if we break up, we promise we're not going to bring it into work or blame the employer. Perfectly fine. But the idea is you got to report it. If you don't report it and someone catches you in the relationship, well, you're going to have to face the consequences of that.
so do you find that the large majority, and I'll just focus on Tampa Bay, the large majority of the employers in the region have some type of policy in place for that?
Yes, I do believe that many of our employers do have a policy in place for that. But I will tell you, you don't need a policy if you're a leader in the company. If you're in the C-suite, you're the CEO or the chief people officer or the chief financial officer, you should know better. If you're going to be in a relationship, you need to report it and make sure that it's not going to cause trouble for the organization. You have a fiduciary duty to do so.
Yeah, at that level, the policy is no.
And you're not that
Right.
smart for doing it.
Exactly.
I was working at a place one time where not only was the CEO dating someone that was somewhere else in the strata of the company, but they were dating like 2 or 3 other ladies.
That's why.
And I was just thinking, like, how stupid am I to work here? I need to find something else immediately because this is going to blow up.
Yeah.
And I need to go find something safe right away. And so it's not, even if it doesn't come out publicly, it's just not wise.
Or are you laughing?
Just because the way my mind works, I'm thinking about all the jokes the next CEO could say at the press conference that would probably be really terrible for the company. But golly, what an interesting discussion. Thank you guys for talking about
It's
this.
an amazing discussion, right? And I mean, when we all saw it playing out, and I will speak for you, Bill. Bill was like, we got to talk about this locally, right? Who cares that it was in Boston? It was the CEO. Again, no one in Tampa Bay in that position would go to a Coldplay concert and behave that way. However, there are so many other instances of so many other crises, of so many other things that could have equal implications on the company. And so few people that I know have a plan, right? And so I think that's probably at the end of the day, if we put a bow on this conversation, is like have a plan.
Or at least have those professionals on deck before.
Yeah.
At least at a very minimum, it costs you nothing to have them on deck. Like, hey, if something ever happens, I'm calling you. I understand it's going to cost more because we're going to have to work a lot in this moment.
Yeah.
Versus a plan. But like, have figured out and have them on deck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what is our running? Talk about memes. We're losing Bill again, I think. But one of my favorites is thank God that there was no cameras, like no phones with cameras in the 80s when we all grew up, right?
Oh, thank goodness.
Thank God. But we all have to accept now that they are everywhere. The media is everywhere, right? That anyone's a reporter at this point. Anyone can report on what they see and what's going on. And
and everyone has an opinion.
And everyone has an opinion.
And the platform to provide it.
Yeah.
And so if you are a business owner and you don't have a plan and you don't have an attorney and you don't have a crisis leadership firm to work with, even if you're, a local small restaurateur, you have to have these resources available. Train your employees, show them that you're invested, get media trained, even if it's not for the media, even if it's for, your customers. You want to make sure that when you're communicating, it's effective and it has impact. And so you only do that through investing in your skill sets as not just a person, as a business owner. And these are necessities that
it's just another type of insurance.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times when I meet business owners, it's, well, I'm not in crisis. Well, and that's great.
Yeah.
We don't want you to be in crisis, but let's start now.
Yeah. So I would think that the biggest block for you, and this is me, a lot of years in media, is people that have a fear, right? They either don't know what it costs, they don't know what they don't want to find out what it costs, or they think it costs too much. So and I'm putting you on the spot. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, and you can tell me you're not going to answer if you want to. But what's an average if I'm a board and I'm hiring a new CEO and I want to make sure that they get media trained and I want to make sure that we have a crisis management plan, what's an average cost for something like that?
I'll put it to this way. It is a lot cheaper than sending someone on camera and saying the wrong thing or not representing your brand well. And it's nothing that's going to flip the P&L upside down. It's very much a great investment.
Well, plus also most PR firms offer more than just crisis. They also have strategic communication. So like you can go ahead and start that right away to make sure your messaging is in line with your marketplace and all of those sorts of things. So that way you're ready to go, and hopefully you can always avoid one, but you might already have a partner in place.
Well, and yes, and I want to make something clear too, is a lot of people will say, hey, you guys are a PR firm. And I kind of shut that down because I say, we're not a PR firm. We don't want to be a PR firm. We are a crisis leadership firm because we operate at the intersection of leadership, strategy, and communications, which is really the byproduct of the decisions we make for the right reasons. And so it's not just spinning a story, right? It's seeing the whole room, taking account for the legal strategy, for the morality piece of it. What's going on with the family? Do you even have an interest in becoming a better person through this? And then now how do we roll that up and communicate that, not just to the public, but to your employees, to your family, to your board? There's a lot to do. And so a lot of people will say, well, you just spin stories. No, it's actually quite the opposite. We're really working on behalf of the organization for the betterment of what's to come, because there's a lot of people that rely on you to put food on their table.
I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up the conversation. I mean, it's, our whole idea was let's bring local experts and let's offer, which is what we both try to do on a daily basis, right? How do we help people grow their business and make smart business decisions and know what they should be doing? Maybe it's somebody's first CEO role. Maybe that was a wake-up call for a lot of people. Maybe there's people that are going, oh my God, but for the grace of God, right? I mean, there's just so many different ways that could have application to somebody. So thank you for your expertise, Bill. I'm sorry we lost him, but he's also local. He's a labor and employment attorney here that I trust big time. And boards, you never say no. I couldn't love you more. I was like, hey, I got this crazy idea. And he was like, I'm in. But, I think you said it earlier, it's less than a week later and we're all still talking about it. Yeah. Right. And so, and the memes are still being generated and they're getting funnier.
Yeah. Well, when you brought it up, I was like, this thing's going to be old news when we talk about it. But so let's take a look at the actual, the trajectory, the whole trend of what happened, because there's a lot to be learned. And we're going to be following this circumstance. And obviously, you can follow this conversation and find this podcast anywhere where podcasts are found on the Tampa Bay Business and Wealth social media, and obviously on the Bake More Pies and Law of Relevancy podcast social media as well. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.